Hey everyone, today we're exploring another deeply chilling case. If you'd like to support my channel, please hit subscribe and stay engaged. It means a lot to me, and I'd really appreciate it. Let's dive in. In the serene town of Umuarama, a regular morning began like any other. Residents were off to work. Familiar faces roamed the streets, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee hung in the air. No one could have predicted that something so profoundly unsettling would unfold on one of its tranquil streets. An event that would permanently split the town into a before and after. Everything changed. An entire family disappeared overnight, leaving only an eerie silence in their wake. It turned into a heartbreaking tragedy that locals would discuss for years to come. Umuarama, located in Brazil's southern state of Paraná, was home to the Suarez family, a well-known name in the Sain community. Antonio Suarez dos Santos, born in 1956, led the household. A respected entrepreneur, he managed a chain of fabric and accessory shops, not only in Umuarama, but also in neighboring towns. People viewed him as trustworthy, kind, and reliable. He was deeply committed to local charities, often providing food to those in need, sometimes personally delivering meat and grocery packages to struggling families. Once, he even opened his home to an orphan, raising them as part of his family. His wife, Helena Mara dos Santos, born in 1958, was a gentle and nurturing woman who always prioritized others' needs. A full-time homemaker, she devoted her life to fostering a warm, stable environment for her family. Helena kept a low profile, in public focusing on her home, but among her inner circle she was greatly admired for her calm and considerate demeanor. Antonio and Helena raised two daughters. The older, Evelyn Suarez dos Santos, born in 1981, earned a law degree and built a thriving career in the legal field, eventually becoming a judge. Though she moved out early to pursue her career, she stayed closely tied to her parents and younger sister. The younger daughter, Jacqueline Suarez, born in 1982, was more introverted and emotionally sensitive. She also studied law, but her career was less consistent, often interrupted by personal struggles and emotional challenges that made long-term employment difficult. She lived with her parents for much of her adult life, finding solace and stability in the family home. Jacqueline shared an especially tight bond with her mother, and despite her reserved nature, she maintained warm, loving connections with her family. The Suarez family's home stood in a quiet Umuarama neighborhood. Spacious and well-maintained, it was more than just a house. It was a beacon of unity and care. It hosted birthday celebrations, family dinners, and the rhythms of daily life. Antonio and Helena ensured their daughters always felt safe, cherished, and welcome in that home. To outsiders, the Suarez family appeared to lead a stable, harmonious life. Hard work, loyalty, and traditional values defined their world. To neighbors and friends, they embodied integrity and success, earned through honest effort and strong family ties. This solid foundation underpinned the Suarez family's story, one that, until a certain point, seemed no different from many others in small-town Brazil. But what happened next would show just how swiftly even the sturdiest life can unravel. Jacqueline Suarez met Jean-Michel Duza Barros when she was around 39 years old. Their paths crossed unexpectedly. Jean, roughly the same age, seemed polished and presented himself as someone who could provide the emotional support Jacqueline had long sought. At the time, Jean-Michel held a steady public sector job, earned a reliable income, and exuded confidence. He carefully cultivated an image of dependability and care, quickly earning Jacqueline's trust. Early on, he appeared to offer exactly what she needed: stability, attention, and emotional connection. Their relationship progressed rapidly. Jacqueline's parents, Antonio and Helena, watched with cautious hope. They wished this new bond would bring their daughter peace and security. They didn't express strong reservations, choosing instead to step back and let the relationship develop naturally. Still, from the start, those paying close attention might have noticed subtle red flags in John's behavior. He displayed an intense curiosity about Jacqueline's whereabouts and social circle. His questions often crossed the line of casual interest. His comments about her clothing or friends started as playful but grew increasingly critical and demanding. Evelyn Suarez dos Santos, Jacqueline's older sister, later recalled noticing signs of excessive control in Jean's actions. Even early in their relationship, his behavior sometimes strayed beyond healthy boundaries. He showed jealousy over Jacqueline's professional interactions and often grumbled about her discussions with colleagues in the legal field. Over time, Jean began pulling Jacqueline away from her usual social activities. Her visits to the legal association, gatherings with friends, and attendance at public events dwindled. She started spending most of her time with him, slowly disconnecting from her familiar circles. For Jacqueline, who often sought external stability, this growing isolation initially felt like care and protection, but it gradually became a form of control. Antonio and Helena, while striving to maintain a supportive relationship with their daughter, noticed changes in her demeanor. Jacqueline became more withdrawn, shared less about her thoughts, and sometimes excused Jean's mood swings by saying he was just navigating tough times. Wanting to avoid adding pressure, her parents stayed patient, hoping the situation might resolve itself. As time passed, Jean began exerting more influence over Jacqueline's life and, by extension, her family. He appeared more frequently at the Suarez home, joining family dinners, attending holidays, and presenting himself as someone eager to integrate into their world. To outsiders, impressions of Jean varied. Some saw a man trying to build a connection, while others felt uneasy about his tone and behavior. Despite lingering concerns, Jacqueline chose to continue the relationship. After past struggles, the idea of building a personal life felt significant to her. Gradually, Jean-Michel Douze-Barros became a central figure in both her life and her family's. As time went on, Antonio and Helena noticed further changes in their daughter. Jacqueline grew more reserved, avoided discussing her future, and often seemed emotionally exhausted. Her parents sensed rising tension, but hesitated to confront it directly, fearing it might worsen things. Disagreements between Jean and Jacqueline became more frequent. The triggers were often minor, yet the arguments quickly escalated into loud, distressing conflicts. Disputes were especially common regarding Jacqueline's professional life, which Jean openly disapproved of. Even routine phone calls sparked suspicion and jealousy in him. Evelyn, observing the situation, tried to encourage her sister to maintain some independence, but her efforts had little impact. Jacqueline became more entangled in a relationship marked by emotional volatility and increasing pressure. Though her parents remained supportive, Jacqueline's sense of isolation grew within the Suarez household. The once peaceful, harmonious atmosphere became strained. Evenings once filled with calm and connection were now interrupted by arguments. Jean's temper and impatience became more apparent, and he no longer restrained his frustration, even in front of Antonio and Helena. This deeply worried the parents, particularly concerning their daughter's emotional well-being. Antonio tried to engage Jean in open conversations, offering help or solutions to resolve issues. But these efforts were often met with cold politeness or subtle irritation. Helena, more attuned to Jacqueline's emotional signals, made a conscious effort to stay close. Yet she recognized how profoundly Jean's presence was affecting her daughter's state of mind. Initially, the Suarez family hoped the storm would pass, that time would ease the tension. But instead, each day seemed to widen the gap between the life Jacqueline once knew and the one she now lived. It became increasingly clear this wasn't just a challenging phase in a relationship, it was the emergence of something far more troubling. By the time Jacqueline Suarez and Jean-Michel decided to formally commit, their relationship was already fraught with strain. Constant arguments, emotional pressure, and overwhelming jealousy left little room for genuine joy. Still, despite the underlying tension, wedding preparations moved forward. From the beginning, organizing the ceremony was stressful. Once hopeful that marriage might offer a fresh start, Jacqueline now seemed emotionally distant. She participated minimally in the planning, leaving most arrangements to her parents, who tried to support her and maintain a sense of normalcy, even if only superficially. The day before the wedding, a serious incident unfolded. Jean had an emotional outburst, triggered by what he perceived as Jacqueline's unfaithfulness, a routine work-related message he misinterpreted as betrayal. His reaction was so intense that it nearly derailed the entire ceremony. According to those close to the situation, there was even talk of canceling the wedding at the last moment. Antonio and Helena faced an incredibly tough decision. On one hand, they worried that calling off the wedding might worsen Jacqueline's emotional state. On the other, they feared that proceeding with the marriage in such a tense atmosphere could lead to long-term harm. Ultimately, they chose not to interfere. The ceremony went ahead, but it lacked any true sense of celebration. Among the guests, there was a noticeable tension. People weren't smiling. Instead, their expressions revealed discomfort and concern. Many noted Jacqueline's distant demeanor. She barely smiled and moved through the event mechanically. Jean, by contrast, appeared composed. In public, he maintained a calm, respectful image, though those who knew him well sensed an undercurrent of irritation behind his polite exterior. The entire event felt more like a formality than the joyful beginning of a new chapter. In his speech that day, Antonio emphasized the importance of patience and mutual support in marriage. Notably, he avoided traditional expressions of joy or optimism. His words were careful, as though he was trying to balance preserving the moment with voicing concern for his daughter's future. Evelyn, who attended the ceremony, would later recall that a heavy feeling hung in the air from the start of the day. She and other close relatives couldn't shake the sense that things were moving in the wrong direction, that something wasn't right. After the ceremony, the newlyweds returned to Antonio and Helena's home. Originally, the plan had been for Jacqueline and Jean to begin their life together in a separate place. But for various reasons, including financial ones, they stayed in the family home. It was not a joyful decision, but a practical one, and it only deepened the cracks that had already begun to show. Jacqueline tried to adjust to her new reality. She went through the motions, handling daily tasks and avoiding discussions about deeper issues. John continued presenting himself in public as a caring husband, but behind closed doors, the tension between them was growing. In the early weeks of their marriage, it became clear that the problems they had faced before hadn't gone away. In fact, living together under the same roof as her parents only made things worse. Small disagreements turned into major arguments. It was becoming obvious that the relationship rooted in dependency and emotional pressure had little chance of healing. After the wedding, John fully settled into the Suarez household. At first, it was expected that he would contribute to the family's expenses, but that didn't happen. Jean soon quit his public sector job, claiming he wanted to start his own business. But after stepping away from his job, he didn't take any real steps in that direction. In practice, all financial responsibilities fell on Antonio and Helena. They now supported not just Jacqueline, but also her husband. Jean, without a steady income, showed no urgency about changing his situation. He spent his days mostly idle, showing little interest in finding work or developing a business. Antonio, a man who had built his life on discipline and responsibility, struggled to understand this behavior. It became a quiet source of tension in the home. He tried to gently raise the issue of financial independence, even suggesting possible business ventures Jean could pursue, but Jean responded only with vague promises and excuses. Eventually, John approached Antonio with a specific request: financial support to start a sewing supply store. He asked for $30,000, claiming this investment would secure financial independence for both him and Jacqueline. Despite his reservations, Antonio provided the money, hoping that this gesture might finally bring some stability. Instead of investing in a business as promised, Jean used the funds to buy himself a car. This move deeply disappointed Antonio and Helena. Their trust had been broken, but they chose not to escalate the situation right away, hoping to avoid open conflict for Jacqueline's sake. With a car purchase, Jean's reliance on the family only deepened. He continued living off his in-laws, showing no real motivation to change his circumstances. The financial burden on Antonio grew heavier, and the family's respect for Jean steadily declined. Evelyn, watching all this unfold, voiced growing concern about how Jean's inactivity and dependent attitude were affecting the household. She tried to explain to Jacqueline how important it was to establish financial independence, but her efforts seemed to have little impact. Emotionally tied to John, Jacqueline often defended his lack of action. She would tell her parents he just needed time to adjust, that he was still recovering from the stress of his previous job, and that his future plans were still unclear. Her attempts to smooth things over only made the situation worse. Over time, arguments in the Soares household became more frequent. The reasons varied, but the pattern remained. Jean-Michel would become irritable, demand control, and resist any form of compromise. His behavior created constant tension, gradually eroding the home's once warm and welcoming atmosphere. Helena, who had initially tried to keep the peace, now felt increasingly anxious about her daughter's safety and the family's stability. She noticed John's angry outbursts were becoming less predictable. During one argument, he slammed a door so forcefully that it broke. That incident became a red flag for Helena, a sign that the situation might escalate further. One of the most alarming moments came after an intense argument, which led Antonio to take serious protective action. He insisted that Helena and Jacqueline temporarily leave the house and stay at a hotel. While they were gone, he changed the locks. This was a desperate move meant to restrict Jay's access to their home and restore a sense of control. John saw Antonio's actions as a betrayal. Rather than reflecting on his own behavior, he continued to blame everyone around him for the growing conflict. His aggressive reactions, refusal to acknowledge fault, and unwillingness to change made peaceful coexistence impossible. Despite Antonio's efforts, the problem wasn't resolved. Jacqueline, still under John's emotional influence, wanted to preserve the relationship. She pushed for her husband to return home, asking her parents to give him another chance. This conflict between her wishes and the very real threat to their family's safety put Antonio and Helena in a painful and complicated position. The fear for Jacqueline's future continued to grow. Helena in particular felt the weight of the situation more intensely. She confided in Evelyn, admitting she no longer felt safe in her own home. And yet, taking firm action was difficult. Any attempt to create distance between Jean and the family was seen by Jacqueline as an attack on her personal life. On August 8, 2021, Father's Day in Brazil, the atmosphere inside the Soares family home reflected a sense of tradition. Celebrating holidays had always been an important part of their life, and even amid growing tensions, they tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. The morning passed quietly with no indication of what was to come. Jean-Michel, who by then was no longer living with Jacqueline or her parents, unexpectedly showed up at the house. In his hands, he carried a package which he offered to Antonio as a Father's Day gift. The visit appeared to be a peace offering, a gesture of reconciliation. Jean's demeanor was composed, and he went out of his way to appear courteous and polite. Antonio and Helena accepted the gift with polite restraint. They didn't show much enthusiasm, but they also didn't refuse it, aiming to keep the situation calm and avoid triggering more conflict. Jacqueline, observing from the side, appeared tense, but tried to maintain her composure as well. Jean stayed at the house for about an hour. The conversation during that time remained on the surface, avoiding any contentious topics. He behaved calmly and didn't provoke any arguments. When he left, there was a lingering sense of ambiguity. His visit felt oddly out of character given the past conflicts and intense outbursts. The seemingly peaceful gesture didn't match the gravity of the unresolved issues that had been building for months. But no one suspected that this day would be the last normal one they would ever experience. What looked like an attempt to make peace was, in truth, hiding something far more serious. Behind Jean's outward politeness were intentions no one could have imagined at the time. On the morning of August 9, 2021, the Soares residence appeared, calm from the outside. Their housekeeper, who arrived early as usual, expected to be greeted by the familiar sounds of morning routines, activity in the kitchen, movement in the hallways. Instead, what met her was an eerie silence. No one responded to her greetings. As she walked further into the house, something felt wrong. Then she saw it, a scene that left her frozen in place. In the dining room, she found Antonio and Helena, both unresponsive. Their position and the state of the room immediately indicated that something violent had taken place. Without hesitation, she contacted emergency services. Police arrived quickly. A preliminary assessment found no signs of forced entry. All doors and windows were intact. The house appeared orderly except for the dining room where the scene was centered. Forensic experts determined that Antonio and Helena had suffered a sudden and brutal assault. Both had sustained multiple injuries focused around the head, neck, and chest. The trauma was caused by both blunt and sharp objects, though the exact weapon could not be confirmed. There were no clear signs of defensive wounds, leading investigators to believe the attack was swift, and the victims had no chance to react or escape. Jacqueline Suarez was found upstairs in the bathroom. Unlike her parents, her injuries were far more severe. She had multiple stab and slash wounds likely inflicted with a sharp blade. The nature of her injuries suggested sustained force, pointing to a possible personal motive behind her attack. The number of wounds on her body was significantly greater than those found on Antonio and Helena. The scene inside the house was deeply disturbing. Investigators documented every detail, photographed the rooms, and collected potential evidence. It was immediately clear that the crime had taken place indoors and that the victims hadn't resisted or been attacked from the outside. Shock rippled through everyone who entered the scene. Even seasoned officers remarked on the unusually intense level of aggression and how carefully the aftermath had been concealed. An official investigation was launched aimed at uncovering exactly what had unfolded in that home during the night. Police quickly reached the conclusion that the individual responsible for the crime was familiar to the victims and had likely not raised any suspicion upon entry. The lack of struggle and the undisturbed nature of the house supported the theory that the attack had been sudden and deliberate. Investigators began questioning the closest relatives, friends, and acquaintances of the Suarez family. Their main goal was to identify who had recently been in contact with Antonio, Helena, and Jacqueline. During the interviews, one name stood out. Jean-Michel Duza Barros, Jacqueline's former husband, had been seen at the house just one day before the tragedy. His visit took on a new significance. Jean had brought a Father's Day gift for Antonio, spent about an hour inside the home, and then left. This detail quickly made him a central figure in the investigation. His behavior that day, as well as his actions in the hours that followed, became a key focus of scrutiny. Soon, investigators discovered that Jean hadn't returned home immediately after visiting the Suarez family. Statements given by his mother regarding his whereabouts that evening raised doubts. These inconsistencies, along with the absence of any signs of forced entry at the crime scene and other circumstantial evidence, deepened suspicions. By this stage in the investigation, law enforcement had concluded that the crime had likely been committed by someone within the family's inner circle. To verify Jean's alibi, police began reviewing footage from surveillance cameras located throughout the streets of Umuarama. Particular attention was given to routes near the Suarez residence and surrounding neighborhoods. The video analysis confirmed that Jean's car had been seen in the area around the Suarez home on the day of the incident. One camera showed his vehicle heading to another part of town afterward, where it stopped near a storm drain. The footage captured a man matching Jean's build exiting the car, approaching the drain, and tossing something inside. At the same time, investigators analyzed data from the phones of both the victims and the suspect. Jacqueline's phone had a tracking app installed, which could detect the location of associated devices. The data revealed that on the day of the incident, Jean's and Jacqueline's phones were logged at the same locations during several key moments, strongly suggesting they were in close proximity. Not long after that, Jean's phone suddenly stopped, transmitting location data. Investigators believed this was a deliberate move to obscure his movements. Based on the surveillance footage and phone data, police headed to the location where Jean was believed to have discarded something. Upon inspecting the storm drain, they recovered 2 mobile phones belonging to Antonio and Helena. Jacqueline's device was not found, adding complexity to the reconstruction of events. The discovery of the phones in the drain became a critical piece of evidence. It clearly showed an attempt to dispose of potential evidence immediately following the crime. The act appeared methodical, indicating that the suspect may have planned his steps in advance. Each of these findings was carefully recorded and preserved by investigators. According to investigators, it was believed that the weapon used in the crime was a sharp object, possibly a knife or a similar tool. However, the exact type couldn't be confirmed as the item itself was never recovered. Evidence suggested that different types of force or possibly different objects had been used, or that the same object was utilized with both its blunt and sharp sides. Jean's earlier statement soon began to conflict with the objective evidence. He had claimed that after leaving the Suarez home, he immediately went to his mother's house. However, messages found on his mother's phone painted a different picture. She had been asking him where he was at the time he claimed to have already arrived. Jean denied any involvement in the events. He stated that his visit to the Suarez family was solely to deliver a Father's Day gift and that he left soon afterward. He claimed that he learned about the tragedy from the news. When questioned about the physical evidence, he gave evasive answers or dismissed the findings as coincidences. However, the combination of surveillance footage, inconsistencies in Jean's story, the discovery of discarded phones and forensic data formed a coherent timeline. At this point, police had sufficient grounds to believe that Jean-Michel Douza Barros had deliberately attempted to cover his tracks after committing a serious crime. A forensic examination of the Suarez home provided critical new evidence. Specialists used chemical reagents to detect hidden traces of blood. Multiple traces were found throughout the house, especially in the hallways, stairwell, and kitchen. Analysis showed that an effort to clean up had been made shortly after the crime. Water stains and cleaning detergent marks were identified on the floors, along with signs of a mop and a garden hose having been used, indicating a deliberate attempt to erase evidence. Amid this data, particular attention was drawn to footwear, impressions found throughout the home. Upon studying these prints, forensic experts noticed an unusual detail. There were two distinct tread patterns, both left by flip-flops. The shapes and sizes didn't match, initially raising the possibility that more than one person had been involved. Further analysis revealed that the differences in sole patterns actually belonged to the same individual. Each print matched a different brand of flip-flop, but the stride length, pressure points, and walking style were identical. This led investigators to conclude that one person had been wearing a mismatched pair of flip-flops from two different manufacturers. During a search, Jean-Michel's black flip-flops were seized. Examination confirmed that the left and right shoes came from different brands. This became a crucial piece of evidence in matching the prints found at the crime scene. Forensic experts conducted a detailed comparative analysis. The shape of the soles, patterns of wear, and pressure distribution matched exactly with the prints discovered in the house. Such a match was highly unlikely to occur by chance, especially given the unique nature of the mismatched footwear. Additional reviews of the scene revealed that the footprints were not random. Instead, they indicated deliberate movement between the bodies and sources of water from the kitchen to the front door. This pattern showed that the individual was familiar with the layout of the house and was acting intentionally after the crime had been committed. The presence of footprints made by two different flip-flops, confirmed to belong to one person, further reinforced the theory of premeditation. The identification of Jean's footwear as matching the prints found at the scene became a key piece of evidence linking him to the crime at the time it occurred. The forensic conclusions ultimately dismantled any theories that the tragedy was a result of an accidental loss of control or the actions of an unknown outsider. The picture was becoming increasingly clear. The crime had been committed by someone who knew the layout of the house, acted deliberately, and made conscious efforts to cover their tracks. After charges were filed, Jean-Michel's defense team launched an aggressive effort to challenge the evidence gathered by investigators. Their primary strategy was to highlight any details that might raise doubt in the minds of the jurors. One of their main arguments focused on the size of the footwear. The defense insisted that the flip-flops seized from Jean were smaller than his actual shoe size. During the trial, Jean was asked to try them on, and it was visibly clear that the flip-flops appeared tight. His attorneys argued that this discrepancy pointed to either a mishandling of evidence or a potential mistake by investigators. However, prosecutors reminded the court that Jean had voluntarily handed over that specific pair of flip-flops. Furthermore, forensic experts confirmed that the tread patterns and wear marks found at the crime scene perfectly matched the seized footwear, making the size argument far less significant. Another point raised by the defense concerned the blood traces found on a t-shirt recovered from Gene's residence. His lawyers claimed that the blood stains could have resulted from everyday incidents such as minor cuts or contact with animal blood. They attempted to portray this evidence as unreliable, noting that the biological material was too minimal for comprehensive analysis. Despite these efforts, the overall body of evidence, including Gene's movements, lack of a credible alibi, the recovered phones, the matching shoe prints, and his conflicting statements continued to build a strong case for his involvement. The defense's attempts to undermine the evidence struggled against the logical and consistent narrative constructed by the investigation. Michel's behavior following the tragedy became another crucial factor. His detached reaction, lack of visible grief, and quick move to claim inheritance rights raised serious suspicions. Just weeks after the SARS family's deaths, Gene began legal proceedings to be recognized as the widower hour of Jacqueline Suarez, positioning himself to inherit her assets. This action stunned not only the relatives of the victims, but also the wider community of Umuarama. For many, it served as a moral confirmation of his guilt. Gene's actions immediately following the tragedy suggested a clear financial motive, and they further dismantled any image of him as an innocent party affected by unfortunate circumstances. After a careful review of the evidence, the jury found Jean-Michel guilty of committing a crime against 3 individuals. He was sentenced to 86 years and 8 months in prison and ordered to pay 450,000 Brazilian reais in restitution to the victims' family. While the verdict was seen as a triumph of justice, no ruling could undo the profound loss that had already been suffered. After the verdict, a heavy silence fell over the Suarez family home. The only surviving member was Evelyn Suarez dos Santos, now left without her parents and sister. Although there was some comfort in knowing the responsible party was held accountable, the pain of loss remained. For Evelyn, a new chapter began, one where every memory of the past carried the weight of grief. The house that once symbolized warmth and unity stood as a silent witness to a tragedy that forever changed the lives of everyone connected to it. In Umuarama, the story of the Suarez family remains a stark reminder of how dangerous misplaced trust can be, even toward those once welcomed into your home. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.